You know, when we were kids, we always had some sort of hero that we looked up to, whether it was, a superhero actually. Maybe it was an aunt or an uncle, but maybe it was a cartoon. Regardless, we had these aspirations of what we could be and what we, want to be, what feels like reaching our potential. As we get older, it's like people end up, let's say, being insurance clerks or, stay-at-home parents. Amazing. All of these are jobs. Working as a clerk somewhere, getting a government gig. Who knows, right? Endless, endless. Regardless, it's like there's often this feeling inside of us that we're not quite on our path. And if that's you, then I want to explore this a little bit. My name's Chad Cornell, and I work as a holistic therapist. I help people with physical health issues, but all kinds of health issues. And my goal with this channel is to kind of help myself and others bloom. Like, for me, one of my passions is sharing and teaching. And those of you out there that know this feeling. One of the best feelings is helping people. Seeing somebody who was infertile have children or thought they were infertile, or somebody who can't sleep, or somebody who's depressed feel better. All these many, many, many ways that, I've been blessed with the opportunity to help people. And with this channel, I'm making it up as I go. Like, honestly, I don't even particularly know what I'm going to talk about today. All I know is that one of my personal obstacles and goals is to share. That I want to create. I feel like this world is, kind of pressing in on us and trying to kind of keep us locked in, and increasingly so on these mono tracks of reality, these sort of like to constrict and to play it safe and to do what we know. And I was thinking it might be interesting for me to talk about how I became an herbalist, because I went to natural health school and it was a good foundation for me. Obviously the learning went way beyond that, but I originally started out my journey with natural health. I was actually a wilderness guide, and I was studying how to be taking people. I wanted to be in the Rockies, I wanted to be in the oceans, like I was kayak guiding, and oh man, I just love being out in the air, in the wild, in the open, and the free. And that's what made me feel alive. Funny, I was actually thinking my hero was Tarzan. Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, right? I loved Tarzan. Like, he got this tree house, he had all these cool animal friends, he just swung through the trees. He had a super beautiful woman in his life, Jane, for those of you that might be too young to know. And you know, I I think I grew up with that archetype sort of guiding me, which of course doesn't fit in very well with our modern techno world, but here we are nonetheless, trying to integrate these two. And yeah, so what happened was I went to this school and I learned all this natural healing stuff. I was around all these people, the Haida people and indigenous people out there teaching me about the connection to this beautiful earth, sending me back to look at my own roots. I'll never forget the elder saying, you cannot help us until you realize what your own ancestors have lost. And I didn't really know what that meant. So here I am, all these years later. I've been practicing herbalism for 20 some years. But first, I had to leave security behind. I had to leave all that was familiar. So I left behind my tourism degree and working in the I went to school in Vancouver, and I got placed up in the Queen Charlotte Islands, they were called back then, Haida. And it's where I kind of unhooked from the matrix. It's kind of where I drank the tea, so to speak. And I ended up coming back, and of course you need to make money, right? Not that many people were into herbalism back then. Like all these grocery stores now that you see carrying all these natural health products and essential oils, like that didn't exist. It really was super duper fringe in the late 90s. And people would joke when I said, you know what, I think I'm feeling the call. I'm feeling the call to become an herbalist. Oh man, if you've ever seen that movie, Call of the Wild, it might remind you of this, like this calling. And if you haven't, check it out, The Call of the Wild. A beautiful, beautiful and somewhat sad story for sure, but inspiring. And what I noticed is that the status quo life was calling me back to feeling like I gotta find my spot. I had to pick the spot to live. You have to pick the person to marry. You have to pick the job and the career that's going to give you the pension and all this stuff if you want to feel secure. Of course, the ego loves security, right? But anyways, when I graduated as an herbalist, I still was working as a sort of like I was working for the government, taking care of a beautiful park on the shores of Lake Winnipeg. And I loved my job, and I had everyone would sit around at lunchtime and talk about their pensions and how many years they have left till they retire. Oh my goodness, it was so boring. And if you worked too hard, like people would get mad at you, they'd be like, slow down, you're making us look bad. And it was like my spirit had to shut down just to be there. Some of you probably know what I'm talking about. Back then I had a beard too. Hardly anyone had beards. And I wore it too because I just liked the feeling of that. And 9/11 had happened around that time, and they were calling me Osama bin Laden because all these people in the country, they just didn't quite know what my vibe was about. Regardless, I had to make a choice. I had to take a leap. So I wrote a business plan, and I almost opened my natural health shop and center up in the Interlake of Manitoba, central Canada. But it didn't flow, and I could feel the consciousness wasn't quite ready for it up there. Neither was the population very high, so I had to move back to the city, ironically, to live my calling. And I think back to the moment I had that calling. I was living in a bus, converted school bus, up on this beach that you could literally walk for days and not see another person, facing Alaska. And this is when I was guiding up there, and I had some time off from the guiding season. And what happened was, I was sitting on the beach meditating one day, and I'll never forget it, but like I felt my body moving. Some of you that meditate might know what I'm talking about. It's starting to gyrate, and I wasn't doing it, which was a very weird feeling for me. And I was kind of praying for guidance and trying to center myself. And I would sit on the beach, often sort of blustery up there in the Pacific Northwest, and I'll never forget that even though I was loving my life, spending the cozy nights around the fire with friends, playing music and talking about how the system has to change and feeling like we had all the answers because, of course, we're like 24. And, I ended up, getting this direct download that I had to leave. I had to go. I had to go back into civilization. And it just was, it was harsh, honestly. I remember the feeling of like, no, I don't want to leave this place, these waves, this wilderness, this freedom. But it was my calling, you know? I don't know if I believe in destiny, but looking back at my life, I kind of do right now believe in destiny. And that led me to sort of pack up camp there and head back to Manitoba, where I knew this work was lacking. People who represented reconnection, and natural health approaches, and so on was lacking. And just before I left, there was a guy up in Haida Gwaii named Chris the Walker, and he was famous for, well, unfortunately, he had a rough life event, and he lost his wife. He was a school teacher, pretty normal dude, and he said, "That's it, I'm leaving," and he left everything behind, and he took a shotgun and a backpack and some rain gear, and he headed into the forest. And there would be occasional sightings of Chris the Walker way out on the west coast where there's no roads by fishermen or. And wow, I'm just remembering a story that he told me. So we became friends. How did we become friends? This is, if he's way out there. Well, what happened is somehow he got word, he got left a note that he was going to inherit. Somebody in town had left him their inheritance, and that he was going to inherit this money. And like, because people would find these, like, there's shacks out in the way back woods, right? And people would see that somebody human had been in there and was, sometimes would smoke their cigarettes or light a fire. So they left a note for him that he had this inheritance. So he ended up coming back, and a bunch of us were like building places, and I was living in my bus, and he became friends with us. And we'd sit around the fire, and he hardly ever talked at all, not surprisingly. But I remember we got to go on a hike together. And one thing I remember about him is he never followed a straight line. Like, he would hike through the bush, like, very, very interesting how he traveled. And I asked him then, I said, "What was the wildest thing you ever experienced up there?" And he said, "I shared a deer with a bear." And I was like, wow, that is as wild as it gets. And the Haida Gwaii bears are notoriously kind. Even though they're largest black bears in North America, and our own Riding Mountain in Manitoba as well, big black bears. No attacks from those bears in Haida Gwaii. And as we're sitting there on the hike, we were sitting in this sort of pond. It looked like Africa almost. It was like a marsh with these little shrubs popping up. They look like bonsais. And this little plane flies over. It's funny, as I'm doing that, there literally is a plane flying in about the same spot there. I doubt you'll be able to see it. But we're both looking up at it and just quiet. And he says, "That's a message." And I thought, that's a message, right? What does he mean? And he says, I said, what kind of message? A couple minutes later. And he said that you always got to go back. At some point, you got to go back. And that really ties into my story of coming back to, I never thought I'd leave BC, the mountains. I loved snowboarding and kayaking and being on the big schooners and fishing and all of it, right? But I came back and I opened up my little shop in Westminster, on Westminster and in Winnipeg, and I really felt so blessed by that community there. And I got to see how ready the world was for natural medicine, but I had to put up with going to, the dinner table with the elders, like, I mean, the parents and grandparents and so on, and tell them I'm leaving the government job and I'm going to be an herbalist. I don't know, not the easiest thing. Everyone's laughing and saying, what does that mean? Like selling weed? Of course, back then, nobody was smoking weed legally. And so I ended up being kind of, I don't know, people I think thought it was crazy. And I ended up feeling like I'm gonna go in both feet and I'm just gonna do this. And if I don't succeed, then I'll do something else, I'll go back to the forest. I think I kind of almost hoped I wouldn't succeed. I think sometimes I thought I would just warm up in Manitoba and then I'd work my way back to Haida. But regardless, I ran that shop for years and years and years. And now it's been about 20, I started in 2004. And, obviously natural health has gone mainstream, which has got its amazing benefits, though I think holistic healing still has a ways to go, because people are good at popping pills and taking tinctures, but a lot of the deeper healings in the mind, which we'll get into maybe another time. So yeah, if you're out there and you're wondering like whether or not you should follow your dreams and your calling and explore your potential, like, I understand it's terrifying, but it's also like, it's a life lived, it's a life lived. At the end of my days, I don't want to feel like, man, I didn't go for it. As you get older, you got kids, you got partners, you got mortgages or whatever you got. Maybe you don't have any of those. That's kind of a blessing in its own way, right? There's blessings in all directions. There's challenges in all directions. But I remember a fridge magnet my friend Indira had. And I often think back to it. I can still see it. And it's from literally 20 years ago. And it said, life expands and contracts according to one's courage. Life expands and contracts according to one's courage. And wow, it's true. It's true, you can't be reckless. You got to be grounded and strategic, but we got to live an authentic life. I mean, they've recently done studies on the highest vibration the human body can emit, and they used to think it was love, right? Compassion. But this pine tree is beautiful. It's not love and compassion anymore. It's authenticity. This tree is expressing itself absolutely authentically with all of its imperfections and beauty. It takes faith to be authentic and trust and speak our truth and live our, I first thought I was trying to apply at this natural health center. I was going to get a room there, and I thought, oh boy, this is a professional place. I see it in the paper, and I had been told by somebody once that people will judge you by your shoes, right? This is so crazy. So I'm like, I'm going to get these really nice shoes, and I bought my first pair of dress socks ever. And I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to apply at this place, and I'm going to get, this is how I'm going to be a professional. I got to counterbalance my bush vibe, and it's time to become a professional. And I took out my socks that morning, and I realized these fancy socks had disintegrated in the dryer or the washer, one of the two. But they're the only fancy socks I had that would match these shoes. Sure enough, I get to the place in town, and I go in and I walk in for my interview, and there's a sign that says, please remove your shoes. I was like, no. And it's like a few minutes before the meeting. And I'm like, I can't. So we'll go down to the grotto here. We're at the Hollywood School, by the way. This is a beautiful place. There's the Peace Pagoda, St. Norbert Arts Center, the old monastery, the LaSalle River down there. Anyways, sure enough, I had to walk with these socks that looked like I had a bad disease because they were like beige, and the pieces were coming off as I was walking across the room, and there were all these people in the waiting room. And I went into the meeting, and oh my God, it was a nightmare. I was trying to cover up my one shoe. This is the grotto. This used to have a Mother Mary statue in there, and we're trying to get one back again. The grotto, beautiful place. Anyways, so the message for me was to be authentic. And when I finally opened my own shop, I could be more authentic. And I still was trying to, like, not make people uncomfortable, because I was coming from the West Coast and we were pretty wild. So I would try to, dress reasonably professional for my new life as a practicing herbalist and seeing clients. But one day when I was just working the shop, I wore this sort of flowery shirt. It was like the most sort of hippie shirt I had at the time. And Wolseley was kind of like a hippie-ish, gentrified hippie hotbed. I thought, yeah, this looks cool, I'll just risk it. And I was a bit uncomfortable. Turns out a police officer comes in and wants, some herbs or some medicine, some natural medicine for his wife. And I was so uncomfortable because it was obvious we were in different worlds in some ways. But you know what? We had an amazing conversation. Such a genuine conversation. I was authentically surrendering to being me, and he was authentically being him. And there, with my little flower shirt on, and it was more flowy and silky. It was a really nice shirt, actually. I wonder what happened to it. He booked a session with me. He was like, I would love to book a consult with you, having these issues going on. And I was like, wow. It's possible to be our authentic selves, and that is apparently the highest frequency that we can put out. And I feel like even on these gadgets, it's a chance for us to attempt to genuinely connect soul to soul through these digital devices. Life is an opportunity to risk being authentic, and you can't try to be authentic. That's the funny thing about being authentic. You can't try. You have to just, what in the East they call Wu Wei. You have to just naturally do without doing. And that's what I kind of like about the challenge of this channel. Like, I'm not interested in being seen per se. If anything, I like to hide out. What I do like is exploring frontiers of creativity and opportunities to be authentic. So I hope that's been entertaining and potentially inspiring for you, because healing, we can be all about the plants and taking this for that and doing this diet and everything. But from what I've noticed after years of running a natural health center, over 2 decades, a lot of people can get really sick trying to be really healthy. And part of it is this idea of trying to, well, the vibe, the vibration behind what we're doing, why we're doing it. Every day is a chance to explore what it might feel like to be a little bit more free, courageous, faithful, filled with some level of trust that it's okay, we can be ourselves. And, you know, one of my first mentors was actually a nutraceutical pharmacist. And he used to say, don't worry, kiddo, 3 S's, because he'd piss off some customers. He'd say, some will, some won't, so what? Some people will like you, some won't. So what? You'll find out. You know, you find out who your friends are, you find out who your people are, you find out who loves the authentic you. So this is the point where I'm supposed to say maybe like and follow. If you're enjoying this content, like and follow. You know, let's spread the love and live these precious lives. Every day is a blessing. This body's a miracle, even if we got issues going on. There's so many things going right now. And it's like these plants here and that spot, that's not very ideal in some ways, right? But they're making it work. Okay, so much love. That's it for this round. I don't know what I'll call this walk, but maybe it's something about finding our path, living the Wu Wei, spontaneously, effortlessly, natural flow, without forcing, without resisting. We're enjoying the adventure. Okay, I'm gonna do a talk at the Peace Pagoda, maybe sometime soon. Okay, much love. That's it for now. Bye-bye.